Hello and good morning. Just waiting a few seconds till everyone is able to join our today's webinar. So it's 10 o'clock German time. So wherever you join our meeting, hopefully you had your cup of coffee and we'll start within the next few seconds. Good. So welcome to all to our today's webinar out of our webinar series Mastering Enterprise-Wide Risk Assessment. My name is Dirk Findeisen. I will guide you through today's webinar. Main topic is leveraging data integration and automating for risk rating. And as usual, my colleague Khan Nguyen will join me and will also provide some content today, the most relevant one, by the way. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. MSG, as you can see, we are from MSG. MSG is an international group acting in roughly about 32 countries for more than 40 years, and last year's turnover was approximately 1.4 billion euros, with more than 10,000 consultants, mainly consultants and software engineers. We are, at least in Germany or in the German-speaking countries, one of the top 4 consultants rated by customers, by the way. So, and within this MSG group, MSG Rethink Compliance is the expert for anti-financial crime compliance, which is shown here with the full end-to-end service portfolio. For our webinar today, as usual, so I'm not sure how many of you already had a chance to follow up one of our past webinars. We always try to involve you, not only by answering your questions, I'm coming to that one in a minute, but also by asking about your experience. And therefore, we have Mentimeter. We ask you for some poll questions. You can either use this QR code and just scan it with your cell phone and then join the poll through your cell phone, or you go to menti.com using this presentation code to be there. Or we will also provide you a link in the chat that you can use to just join by your web browser and then answer the questions. So of course, it's up to you whether you join or not, but we would be delighted to see as many of you engaging into that polls. In regards to the communication, as mentioned, you are all muted, so there is no way to interact with us verbally. But of course, in regards to your questions, you can use the chat functionality. By the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A session, and hopefully we've been able then to answer all your questions. And in the case that you don't want to share your questions in public, you can also send us an email at info@msg-compliance.com, assuming that this email address will be also shown in the chat, just in case you don't want to share your questions in public. So, from an agenda perspective, we always come with 4 chapters for this kind of webinar. And today, the first chapter is about introducing you to risk rating models. After that, it's about how you calculate your risk, what kind of calculation methods are available and meaningful. Before we then discuss on how you get the data into your risk model and how to use the result out of your risk models and to get it integrated in an overall solution. Last but not least, Khan will prepare or has already prepared some practical use cases and will guide you through those use cases. So hopefully you're ready, got your cup of coffee, and we can start now with the first chapter, Introduction to Risk Rating Models. I guess it's obviously what's the aim and the purpose of a risk model is really to assess the likelihood of a financial crime event occurring in your organization by the transactions, by customers or whatsoever. And to really get, let's say, the right risk rating calculated, you might need some risk models. And of course, from a regulatory perspective, you need to have an effective risk model. As this one is the key to protect you from reputational damage and, of course, from fines from the regulators. It's strategically to think about those risk models and to build them as a very strategic part of your overall risk compliance management program. And it's also to be seen as the key backbone, because if you don't know how to risk rate the right way, how can you mitigate and how can you uh, uh, configure, or how can you customize your monitoring systems and your screening systems the right way? So it's let's say really the foundation of all the other activities within your further risk compliance management program. I just put 3 of those risk models here on the screen. Not saying that they are that it's only about those 3 ones. There are many others available. We will, I would say, mention them also in the further webinar today. But I guess one of the most important one is the customer risk model for sure, and the transactional risk model that is typically always in place. And if we combine it with the product and service risk model, it's obvious that specific customer with specific services and product needs has a different overall risk rating. So it's everything connected. So all the risk models will then come together to provide you one overall risk rating. And the key the key ingredients of those risk models are the key risk indicators, the KRIs, as I call them here. And you see from a customer risk model, it's geographies, occupations, customer types, transaction volume and frequency, and you can add multiple others. I guess the most important topic one is if it's about fine-tuning the risk model, and if you delete some of them, you always have to have in mind that some of the key risk indicators are given by the regulators. So don't delete the wrong ones. It would be easy if there wouldn't be any challenges coming with those risk models. And I have them here on this next slide. Not only the challenges, but also the advantages. I guess we don't have to go into the details on the advantages, but from a challenge perspective, it's about mainly that dynamics and the volumes that are challenging those risk models. And of course, the calculation methods, but I will come to that one in the next chapter, because you can think about having different calculation methods to come to your overall risk rating. And depending on what kind of calculation method you're using, it's even more effective or more efficient as the other one. So the key challenge is how to fine-tune how to build the risk model in a way that it really mirrors your risk appetite, your entity risk appetite. And if you are thinking about a group of entities, it's about being or building a consistent risk model that is valid not only from a group perspective, but also from a regional and from a local entity perspective. And even there, if you mix calculation methods to make sure that on a group level that you are comparing apples with apples and not apples with oranges. That's also a very challenging topic here when combining those risk models. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's all about the interplay between those risk models because you need them all to overall calculate your risk. If you build this holistic approach, there's no one size fits all, because if you have a one size fits all model, it's typically neither effective nor efficient, as it's too rigid. So you need to split it into several individual fitting risk models to ensure better anti-financial crime compliance risk management here. So that was a short and fast introduction to the risk rating models. Now joining the chapter 2 and discussing the calculation methods. And I guess the easiest way and the most common way is just to sum up the different risks that you can imagine within your risk model, which is then an additive model, and as more risk you can add, as higher is the overall risk rating. It's simple, it's easy to implement. It might fit for some risk models, some easy risk models. For example, if you really build a very simplistic country risk model, for example, that might be a solution here. Even there, I would recommend another one, but nevertheless, it's working, and it's more working for, let's say, small entities and simple risk models. It's getting challenging if you really want to build a complex risk model because of your for example, for customer risk rating, it's much more complex, and a summation and additive model might not be suitable. Because of those limitations, I would say standard way to deal with risk models is the weighted scoring method. And it's like a scorecard. So you have your different risk factors, and for the different risk factors, you add a weighting factor in it, and then you multiply the weighting factor by the single summations out of your risk factors, so that you can have a sort of dominating risk factors, like typically in a customer risk model. If the customer is a PEP, it doesn't matter what kind of other risk factors are in there from a risk rating perspective, because per definition of the regulator, it needs to be a high risk customer. So these kinds of situations can be covered by a weighted scoring model quite good. So next one would be the highest risk approach. That's a way, a calculation method that can be used by more conservative companies, because it leads to more higher risk ratings than let's say the two methods we had before. Because it always maximizes the risk by the max risk rating that was identified. And then the average scoring, whether you use mean or median, doesn't matter. I guess the main critics of an average scoring is you put one hand into the fridge and one hand you put on your fireplace on the running fire. in the mid of your body, your average temperature might be suitable and fine, but it's definitely hurting on both sides. So it's and that shows that maybe an average scoring model might suit for specific risk models, but might not suit overall, because it's really averaging also the risk position, and it's not showing the real risk that you have. So, and then last but not least, and especially if you use, I'd say, more modern technologies, the risk matrix or decision tree is also in use. So it can be calculated automatically. That's typically when you're using a machine learning algorithm, like a logistical regression model, for example. That's acting like a decision tree. Good thing is you don't need to prepare the decision tree up front. If you do it in a more manual fashion, you have to think about your risk matrix before, and then use the risk matrix as a calculation method within your risk model. So it's simple and intuitive, because obviously it's like a rule system. It's a conditional cause. If this happened, then that happens, and that's the consequence of that. So it's easy to understand why you rate this risk. Limitation is of course, as it comes with some preparation, it's typically less flexible to handle, especially if it comes to fine-tuning efforts. But nevertheless, I guess the key topic in here is you need to adopt the right risk calculation methods to the right risk model. And you can vary them, and you need to optimize it. And the key topics on how to fine-tune or how to modify your risk models to get better results, whether it's a higher effectiveness or a better efficiency, doesn't matter. But the cause or the reason why you optimize can't be a capacity given reasoning, because at least you shouldn't document it, because if so, the regulator will go after you. So it always needs to be a risk-based approach, and the fine-tuning that you can need should always be risk-related and not capacity-driven. And how you can do it is just by using some key metrics. I mentioned a few of them here on this slide. Where you can use, for example, risk scores to improve your prioritization. You can use false positive ratio. That's more for the efficiency. True positive ratio is more for the effectiveness. The risk trend analysis, from my perspective, is not only for the effectiveness as written here. It also helps you in general to understand how the risk is changing, and therefore gives you an indication on how to use it for prioritization and also for effectiveness and efficiency. And the alert response time is also a topic, but be careful, the alert response time. That's when I always say the regulator is always interesting, or is mainly interested in effectiveness and not in efficiency. But if you have a fully inefficient risk model, you will also get fined by the regulator because of the situation that you cannot handle the true risk if you don't see the true risk by all the inefficient alert generation that is caused by an inefficient and inappropriate risk model. So I'm already mentioned a lot of topics, and now it's your turn. And I'm handing over to Khan to guide you through our first poll.
Thank you, Dirk. Yes, so please, if you haven't done it yet, please join the Menti poll. We have the direct link as well in the chat, and then I will switch to the poll now. Okay, so we already have some participants joining, and I will also wait for a couple of seconds so that everyone has a chance to to open the link, and then we can start with the first question. Great, thanks. All right. So in our first question, we would like to know, when you assess AFC risk, do you mainly rely on expert knowledge or on scoring models based on objective data? So you have three options available. So either it's mainly expert knowledge or objective data. If both equally, please choose the third option. I think we talked a lot about calculation method, but what we don't want to forget is that for specific situations, risk models or risk ratings based on expert knowledge can also be very efficient, mainly due to the size and complexity. So therefore, we are quite interested how the situation looks like in your organizations. So we already have.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for your answering those or this question. And it's not surprisingly that both equally is let's say in the lead here. From my perspective, I guess what you need to have in mind is that the regulators are forcing you to prove the adequacy of your risk models. And by giving that, you definitely need to also focus on objective data as you have to backtest your risk models. And from my perspective, what was in the past, it was more mentioned or built on expert knowledge. It needs to be both equally. You have to have your expert knowledge, but you always have to prove by objective data whether your expected knowledge is on the right path, because you don't want to build a bias based on your expert knowledge into your system, and therefore you need to have objective data to get through it. Thanks for that.
Yes, thank you. So let's have a look at the next question. That one is about the calculation methods that we have heard before from Dirk. So now what we would like to know is which of those do you use for your risk assessments, and please also rank them by the frequency of use. So please start with the most frequently used calculation method in your organization. So we're still waiting for some more responses to come in.
It looks that we have some conservative participants in the call, as the highest risk approach is in lead. So that's interesting. These are my bet would have been on the weighted scoring model, to be honest, but it's still the highest risk approach. So it's definitely a conservative and from an effectiveness perspective, one of the best and leading ones. So fair enough. I think, and that's not surprising, the risk matrix or the decision tree based on the complexity is on, let's say, the last rank. So that might change by more modern technologies in use here, because they come with these kind of calculation methods very easily. But okay, great. It's a good perspective on how the calculation methods are in use.
Yes, thank you very much. So please leave your web page open, leave the poll open, because we will continue later on. And now I would like to switch back to our presentation, and Dirk, it's
still my turn. Okay.
It's your turn.
Yeah.
Again.
Let's talk about data integration and how automation might help us in here. So I would just remind you on a slide that we had, I guess, in one of the last webinars as well. If you have your risk model, you have to provide some input data so that the risk model can can calculate or has something to calculate, and then provides you the risk scoring as an output, as a result. And the key question is, how do you integrate not only the input data into the risk model, but also the output data into the other systems. So sometimes you need the risk model, the risk rating, not only in your, let's say, AML system. You would like to hand over the risk model also to your CRM system or your core banking system, or wherever you need to further work with this kind of information. So that's about the data integration topic in here. And of course, data integration always comes with some challenges, as data always comes with challenges. So first challenge is to collect the right kind of data, and typically you have to aggregate it on the same level, because you get different data on different detail levels. So you need to aggregate it to a common data collection layer so that you can hand it over to the risk model. And by doing that, it would also be good if you have a sort of a data standardization and cleansing operation in place, because not all of the data comes the right way. So you have, of course, data quality issues. That's typically, so don't be ashamed by that. Everyone has data quality problems. I guess there are only 2 points in a company where you don't have data quality issues. The first one is if you start the business first time, you don't have a data quality issue, and then if you close the business, then typically you don't have a data quality issue as well. But in between, you always have to battle the data quality fight. So that's definitely one of the key challenges in here, and you always have to think about what is the right data quality I have to work for. Don't go for 100% data quality. You will not reach it anyway. You will just waste money and time and nerves. So the next one is, because the regulators wants to drive you into more and more real-time systems. That means how to prepare the data that a real-time calculation would be possible and feasible, and how to integrate it, especially if you think later on large volumes, how to integrate the data in a way that you can really real-time risk rate based on the data. And then last but not least is sometimes, and that's coming with some data quality issues as well, sometimes you would like to enrich the data, enhance the data to go over the boundaries of your given data qualities. And the question is, how could you do that? How could you add some additional data that could be required within your risk model to come to a better result? And as that is not challenging enough, there is more to come, because you need to automate this one across multiple jurisdictions. So typically you don't have the luxury that you only act into one jurisdiction. You have multiple jurisdiction to cover. Let's assume from a customer risk perspective, your customer base is international. You have correspondent banking relationships, and so on. So it's easy to get the requirement to collect data and to integrate data out of multiple jurisdictions, and that also forces to have a scalable system, but the scalability comes by your business as well, because it's about volumes and volumes of data. Typically, volumes don't go down. Typically, volumes go up, and they go up faster than we as humans can think about, as it's proven that humans cannot think exponential. So, and then nevertheless, if you deal with data, you have to deal with data protection and data security issues. So it's also about taking care about data governance and compliance topics. So that's the whole bunch of challenges that you have in your data integration for your risk assessment overall, and how to feed in the right data into your risk into your risk models to risk rate in an appropriate way. And if you do that, if you, let's say, take those challenges for real, the benefit is you can build a holistic view. So instead of having silos and make siloed decisions based on siloed data, you really can get a holistic view. And a holistic view means you get a holistic risk perspective and not a siloed risk perspective. It's also improving data quality. So if you face data quality issues and if you try to handle them so to a certain level that you can work with the data, you definitely have an improved data quality at the end. The main requirement here is to avoid inconsistencies, and the reason why you do it is really you want to have faster decisions, so you want to have an enhanced decision making. Well, that's the key benefit of doing these data integration journey. And of course, you can automate those steps. I'm putting it in the smart automation because I guess we already shown the Gartner types. Sorry, the Gartner typology of automation, and there is an integrated automation and an adaptive automation. And what I mean with smart is adding machine learning functionality, adding some AI functionality where it's needed to have a sort of a fuzziness automation that is not falling ahead just because of an unknown problem occurs within your data integration process. That's from my perspective what I call smart, but I put it in brackets, so don't blame me for that one. But it's not just a stupid automation, I would call it, like an Excel macro, which is just repetitive work. So it's also repetitive, but adaptive to a certain degree. To really being able to have a sort of an interruption-free automation of your data integration. And if you do so, the main benefits of data integration together with smart automation is a unified balanced approach. And from my perspective, especially if it goes about real-time monitoring and continuous risk assessment, that's the only way you can reach it. Because otherwise, you waste a lot of money in manual activities that can be easily automated, or not that easy as you saw by the challenges, but it definitely can be automated. And the same for data quality issues or data enrichments. So you have to focus them, you have to work with them and get smart solutions to get to this unified balance approach. And from my perspective, that's the same importance level than building up the right risk model. Because even if you have the right risk model, but are not able to feed in the right data, or what do you have? Definitely not the right output then. So both needs to be handled and treated equally from my perspective. So now to the last poll, Khan.
Yes, thanks. We switch to our poll and let's get into our last question. So now what we are interested in is to know if you have a manual of full loop data integration between monitoring and screening and your risk assessments in the following areas. Here we have customer risk classification, some country risk rating, but also enterprise-wide risk assessment. And are you seeing yourself more on a manual data integration or in a full loop integration? So we have a range from 1 to 5 where you can score, and then let's see where we see the higher ratings. So what, of course, we mean by full loop data integration is that data integration works in two directions. The data from your risk assessment can flow back into your monitoring screening process and the other way around, of course. And yeah, I think we have some assumptions, but yeah.
Also the customer risk classification. So doing the customer risk classification will have an impact on the transactional risk rating. The transactional risk rating, as it comes with a potential behavior change of your customer, will influence the customer risk classification and vice versa. So these kinds of full loop integrations are meant, and also in between the risk assessment and the monitoring and screening systems and back, as you mentioned, Khan. Absolutely right. So what we can see here, no one has closed the full loop so far, at least not on an automated level. So there's some work ahead of you folks, because if it comes to robustness and resilience, that's what the regulators are asking you. And not surprisingly, we had a discussion before, Khan, the transactional risk rating model is leading here in regards to automation degree and full loop integration. Which is normal, because everything started with the transactional risk rating in the past, and most experience is coming with this transactional risk rating. And from an enterprise-wide risk assessment, I'm also not surprised to see this one, because from a financial risk perspective, you have to do it full loop integrated anyway. So at least this part is fully covered in here, whereas the non-financial risk part, where anti-financial risk is allocated, is not that standardized so far, and therefore not that easy to close the loop. Okay, great. It's a good,
Thank
you.
It's a
good distribution. Thank you.
Great, thanks for participation. And yeah, let's get back to our last chapter of today's webinar. Now I will continue with our last topic, which is the practical use cases. So what we've brought today are two use cases. One is focusing on the country risk rating, where we would like to show how a risk rating model can look like, integrating mainly qualitative data. And then in the second part, the focus is on the customer risk rating, but here more in the context of an enterprise-wide risk assessment. And then we will see how a nearly automated data integration can look like. So let's get started with our first use case. So what you see here is just an example of a platform where you can conduct different risk assessments, be it country risk ratings or enterprise-wide risk assessments. What we would like to have a look at today is the country risk model. And this is one possible model, of course, to assess the likelihood for money laundering and terrorist financing on a country level. We, of course, like to start by collecting risk factors and group them into different risk groups. So we have regulatory framework and enforcement, of course, which have big impact on the money laundering risk of a country, but other risk factor groups as well. So this is the first step, building our risk model, and then we can drill down and define more detailed risk factors. Here we have broken it down by strength of AML, CTF regulations, but also the effectiveness of law enforcement and regulatory bodies. So of course, to get the information, the data, in order to assess these risk factors, it can be very challenging and hardly to manage by an individual organization. That's why we often get use of or get back to publicly available information data sources from trustworthy organizations and institutions. And here we have, as an example, the FATF mutual evaluation report. So the results here, especially the technical compliance part, where the 40 recommendations are evaluated. And then we also have the Basel AML index. So now the idea is to bring these information from these sources into a scoring model, because we still need to have everything translated, these qualitative information translated into our homogeneous risk rating model. So for the first example, it's quite straightforward. So we have different ratings from the reports related to the technical compliance. We have ratings ranking from compliant to non-compliant, and there we can quite easily map those to our internal risk ratings. But for the Basel AML index, each country gets in a score. That means we need to translate this scoring model into our internal risk rating. And just to show you how it can look like. So when we configure this risk rating, we can either go from, so the Basel AML index ranks from 0 to 10. And you could either take like the same proportion for each of these risk rating, low, medium, high. But if you have a closer look into the index itself, the content, how it's being generated, calculated, you will see that it's hardly, so that there are many countries scoring in that range are considered high risk already. Also due to different expert knowledge, but also based on the report results. So it's just not only taking a mathematical same proportion from this whole ranks. So that's why it's more appropriate to adjust the ranks. And for example, to narrow down, for example, the medium part, but also based on your risk appetite, you can already rank scores from starting from 5.0 as a high risk. So now you can adjust then these ratings to your risk factor, and then that's, for example, it is. But if you, I mean, when you integrate qualitative data into your risk model, you of course need to understand what data are behind. And if you know, the Basel AML index already includes information and data from the mutual evaluation reports, up to 50% from the index score is consists of these results. That's why what we could adjust the rating model is to adjust the weighting. So at the moment, by default, it's 50-50. So it's equally a distributed, but if you can adjust it, for example, to reduce the impact of the Basel index here slightly, so that it just like accompany the overall risk rating for that risk factor. So by saving it, you have an adjusted model, rating model for that specific situation. So really depending on the information that you include, you need to adjust, or you will have different possibilities to adjust the model that suits the needs and also this situation best. So after having, when you set up this first framework, you could also go into another example of looking into the sanctions, for example. So sanctioned countries can also have impact on the overall money laundering risk. That's why we will look into these three different sanctions lists, and also score and map them to our risk ratings. So the idea is to get these risk ratings mapped to whether the country, a specific country, has no sanctions, no major sanctions, full sanctions. So in terms of full sanctions, we will have a full ban of that country. That's why we have mapped that to a KO, knocked out country or risk rating. But since the default is an average, so a weighted average calculation method, that might not be suitable to that specific risk factor, because if you have a high risk from the OFAC sanctions list, but you are not listed on the UN list, you don't want the risk to be reduced by that fact. You still want to get the highest risk. So that's why there are also possibilities to adjust the model by, for example, adding conditions that really ensure that the highest risk will remain. So here you can check whenever one of these lists has a full sanctions as the information provided for that country, the entire risk factor risk rating will be also the KO risk. And the same can also be done for the high risk situation. So there were two examples that I want to show how you can adjust this rating model according to different scenarios. And when we look into the assessment itself, here from the country, you can now add different countries, apply that risk model, and get the results according to that homogeneous risk model applied to all of the countries, and you have a comparable risk rating list that can be exported, for example, as well. So that you can, for example, import it into other systems such as AML monitoring systems, or using country risk rating in order to complete and enhance your customer risk rating as well. So then for the next example, we have the customer risk rating. Now we want to have a look at the data two-step integration. One is a more manual and then a more automated. So now let's have a look at the customer risk, which is part of an enterprise risk assessment. So I just limit this risk model for the webinar and just focus on the customer risk. We have different risk factors by groups, and then also by risk factors. Here you see there are different data points, indicators that you want to include to assess the customer risk. So we are focusing solely on quantitative data. As an example, the proportion of political exposed persons in the customer base. So now how can you get this information? Another example can also be transaction behavior. Here you really look into transactions related to your high-risk customers, and then you want to identify the percentage, for example, of total transaction volume involving high-risk transactions. These are data that you can get from your monitoring system based on alerts that are being set in your AML monitoring systems. And now we want to get these data from those external systems. So as a functionality, this platform has an import data import interface. So this is the form or the template for the data file with the different columns that needs to be filled in. And now you can go into your AML system and get the information out of the database. So this is what I would like to show here is just something that you normally from a business perspective don't need to deal with, but it's not rocket science. It can be easily done by your IT department, having knowledge on the systems and creating more or less very simple queries in order to get the information, to count the number of PEPs and also to calculate the proportion compared to the entire customer base. So it's not a black box. Someone can do it, and it's not difficult, but it's just need to be the right person to do it. And then next step would be the export into a CSV file. And as a user of such system, you can then access these reports, for example, by editing and entering the ID from the risk assessment platform, and then you will get the export from the system that is tailor-made, and it fits completely the file template that is required for the risk assessment platform. So now when you have this information available, the data file is exported, you can choose it and map it into the system. And then you can go to the risk assessment itself. So we have here our country enterprise-wide risk assessment with all the risk factors for the customer risk. And you see that all the data points are still empty. And if we map those now to the data that we just imported before, then everything gets populated. And that's the main benefit, because if you have these files available, you can update it, you can use the same format. And next year, for example, you can update the data easily by new statistical information from the other systems. Then the next step would be a more automated integration. So if the platform, for example, provides an automated integration interface, here in that case, you are sending a JSON file, which is also a text file format that can be generated from IT systems and send it through the API by just more or less just adding this as an address. And this can look like this. So instead of exporting data into a CSV file, you get the information that you have filtered before here in a JSON file and send these data into the risk assessment platform, meaning it's pushing the data. So you don't need to get the data, the file from the system and import them. It's automatically pushed to the system. So it will be done in the background, and the data will be automatically updated. So that's really is a big step towards event-driven risk assessment update. So you can really comply to regulatory requirements of having an up-to-date risk assessment even during the year. So these are the two use cases I wanted to demonstrate. So we have different data integration, quantitative and qualitative data, and how you can best integrate them, calculate them, and hopefully also almost automate the integration so that life would be easier for you during risk assessment processes. Thank you very much. And then let's go back to the presentation, and to our last step.
Yeah, we received some questions. So what I was not aware, because otherwise I would have mentioned it up front. Obviously, there's also an option to provide anonymous questions. So there was one quite early in the discussion. Mr. Deere, could you kindly share the first slides on introduction to risk models? Yes. We will share it. You will shortly receive an email with access to the recording and also to the slide deck that we presented here. So then there was another question. I take this one because it's affecting what you've shown, Khan, from my perspective, but we can discuss. There was a question, do I understand correctly that we can link the risk assessment directly to the monitoring system to see if we need to update a particular risk area or not? From my understanding, that was what you've shown already. But maybe some few words from your side on that question.
Yeah, so that's definitely the goal. And what I showed was the integration of statistical customer segments data with like risk factors, risk indicators from your enterprise-wide risk assessment. And of course, you need an interface and some preparation, but once it's set up, you will get all the updated statistical information from monitoring system automatically pushed into your risk assessment so that you can update it on a timely manner.
Yeah, perfect. So then we have another question, the effectiveness of the risk matrix, especially the 5x5 matrix has been a subject of discussion of late. No wonder in the poll, risk matrix scored the least. What is Mr. Dirk's opinion on the effectiveness of using the risk matrix? Yeah, so the short one is it's easy to use, it's easy to visualize. That's why you typically have the 5x5 matrix used for higher management information or top management information, but it's not feasible or it's not meaningful in the usage in anti-financial crime. There are multiple reasons for that one. First, it's not granular enough. Second, it assumes that there is a linearity between likelihood and impact, which is not true. So you can, for example, have a low impact risk that could still have a systematic consequence. So, for example, that's not fitting into, or it's not covered the right way into this kind of a risk matrix. Second of all, if you would like to use a risk matrix, you need to have several risk matrices to really cover the risk. So for the different risk models, you have to have different risk matrices as well. And from, I guess, one of the main topics, and that leads me to another question that was asked here in the chat, and that's the subjectivity in the scoring. So it's purely based on the expert that built the matrix, how to position the different risk factors in here. So from my perspective, that's those are the I would say key limitations for the risk matrix. It's nice to show, it's nice to see, it's easy to understand. Therefore, from my perspective, you should use this one. You have your different granular risk model underneath, and then aggregate automatically with the proven calculation method everything into such a 5-on-5 risk matrix, for example. That would be a very good management tool. And of course, I guess, one on the last webinars, we already had this kind of a visualization presented when it comes to the reporting. So there was a last question so far. We have 2 minutes. That should be enough. When it comes to an audit of the AFC risk model, how can you use objective data to prove adequacy? Yeah, I mentioned that one. I guess there was one question in the poll on how to build the risk assessment on objective data, or whether you use expert or both. You have, from my perspective, as the adequacy needs to be proven by you in regards to the auditors and the regulators. At least that's in Central Europe now coming more and more into the games of the annual auditings. You can build a sort of a backtesting where you simulate different kind of alerts by different thresholds, and so on. So that's how you generate, let's say, objective data, and then get a sort of a validation or proven approval point that your thresholds, for example, or your risk indicators are not capacity-driven set, but are really risk-based, driven on your existing data, on your real-time data, and your existing business model. That's how objective data can be used, and I guess the keyword here is backtesting. So, is there another one coming in? I should also inform that please note that we can only send you the collaterals to the webinar if we have confirmed your email address, if you have confirmed your email address earlier. So please look out for an email, maybe in your spam folders, but there you can get the access to the recording and to the slide decks. So that was an information from our organizer. So yeah, please confirm your email address. Thanks. So there were no more questions. We are 1 minute over, but I guess we had a quite interesting session with very interesting questions and poll results. So thank you all, and wish you all a successful day and rest of the week. Thank you. Bye. Thanks, Khan.
Thank you.